Welcome to the Bernadette Jackson Podcast, where we are redefining how the world views women with daddy issues by discussing topics, sharing stories, and gaining insight, all from the perspective of a fatherless daughter. I'm your host, Bernadette, the creator of Her Way. This episode is brought to you by H.E.R Coalition, a safe space for fatherless daughters to learn, grow, and heal. I created this community to have a space for us to ask our questions, share our stories, and support each other without the risk of rejection or shame. I conduct workshops, host Q&As, and go deeper into discussion about the things I talk about on the podcast and share on social media. If you are a fatherless daughter who knows you deserve amazing relationships and you want to be in community with women who feel the same way, join H.E.R Coalition today. You can do that by visiting BernadetteJackson.com/community. That's BernadetteJackson.com/community. I can't wait to see you inside H.E.R Coalition. Welcome to Storytime, where we highlight the stories of fatherless daughters. We talk about how fatherlessness has affected them, but more importantly, how they have been able to get past the pain. Today we have Storytime with Patrice Grimes, a seasoned award-winning HR professional who utilized her relationship building, coaching, and leadership skill set in the corporate world to transition her experience into a broader, holistic approach that occurs outside of the workplace. Today, Patrice is also known as the Peace Curator and is the founder and CEO of the Oasis Space LLC, where she helps high-achieving, go-getter mentality women embody peace by embracing their authentic identities. As the podcast host of the Oasis Space, she provides personal insight and guest interview enlightenment to equip her community to become a successful peace pursuit. I am super excited to have her on. Let's listen to her interview. Hey, Patrice, it is so nice to have you on the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Bernadette. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I really wanted to get you in here because I know that from what I've heard about your story and just what you're doing, like, my audience really needs to know more about you. So I'm so glad that you did the invitation.
Of course, it's an honor. Thank you.
No problem. So in the beginning of my interviews, I kind of like to ask some icebreaker questions because I want to get my audience, to know a little bit about you outside of what we're going to be talking about today. So what are you most looking forward to this year?
Oh, girl, traveling. Like, that is my thing. People that know me know I love to travel. And so that is something I'm looking forward to. And I'm actually doing what I'm calling this Live Like a Local tour. So I want to go to a couple of cities, stay there for maybe 2 to 4 weeks and really just kind of see how the city is and live there like a local before even considering relocating. So I'm really excited about, even exploring that opportunity.
That's awesome. Are some of these cities going to be out of the country, or is it all going to be in the U.S.?
No, so for my that tour, it'll be all within the U.S. I do have one out of country trip planned with some friends later in the summer, but for that particular tour, it's going to be, U.S. based.
That's awesome. I've always kind of wanted to have a work from anywhere kind of job where, if I decided that I was going to just spend 6 months in the Bahamas, I could still work from there. Right. And I can bring my family along and we can just live there and then move somewhere else. That's so cool.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. The pandemic has brought a lot of freedom to some folks with these jobs.
Yeah. So true. So what would you call the autobiography of your life? What would you name it, just based on everything that you've gone through and your experiences?
Wow, that's a really good question. Honestly, I would say I probably would call it maybe Learning to Love the Uncertainty, maybe. And I think it's because I feel like I've encountered so many things that before would really shake me and rattle me to the core. But I learned to really love when these things that came up in life happened, because it ultimately really catapulted me into this other dimension, something that I can't even describe, that I know if I didn't experience it, I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't be as evolved as I am. And so I think you can use a lot of different words, a lot of different terms, but when you love something, it's something that you nurture, you spend time with it, you really invest in it. And so it's like, for me, really learning to love those uncertainties that may pop up, that may be difficult, and realizing like, okay, this is a challenge, but I know there's going to be something so much greater on the other side of this if I just get through it. So that's probably, I think that's what I would call it. Because all of the challenges I've had in my life, the experiences I've had in my life, have ultimately brought me to a much better place.
That's awesome. But how did you get there? Like, how did you get to the place where the uncertainty, like the fear of the uncertainty, is not holding you back from kind of like leaning into it? Because I feel like that's really almost a superpower. Like, so many people, when they're scared about something and they don't know like what's to come, it kind of paralyzes you. So how did you get past that?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, that's kind of what I talk about as a part of my business. I mean, I'm a peace creator coach. So part of that is really just, having this peace to know that despite what happens, I'm able to pivot into whatever the situation is. Like, I can pivot into something else, right? Like, it's not going to break me. History has shown me that, yeah, it sucks in the moment, but I haven't been broken from it. I haven't been defeated. I've literally come out better every single time. And so I think just kind of looking at some of those patterns, you begin to reshape your mindset. And so it definitely wasn't something that happens overnight, right? Yeah. But definitely I would say it's a big mindset shift. There were a lot of things that I had to do, a lot of processes that I took in order just to get to that level, right? And just to have that mindset in various areas of my life.
Yeah, that's really great. I feel like a lot of times it's so hard for us to really kind of embrace the pivot, but sometimes it's the pivot that really leads us to the thing that we're supposed to be doing. So yeah, like that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of pivots, I want to ask you, can you tell us what it was like growing up with your dad? What was that relationship like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, right? Like, my dad has always been in the home. He's a great father. But it wasn't always where I felt so emotionally connected to him. Like, my dad is somewhat of a quiet person. Like, he's the biggest hype person that you'll ever meet. Like, I think it's a family trait where he's the biggest hype person to praise you on things. Like, he's gonna hype you up to he's this big voice. But as far as really getting to know him as a person and him engaging you as a person, it was challenging, right? And so, and I think there is a couple things to that. My dad, one, he is a product of his parents dying at a very young age. So I think him being the oldest and also kind of having that experience of his parents passing away, I think he's carrying that with him and realizing that, kind of adopting some of those characteristics. But separately, I'm a preacher's kid. So both of my parents are pastors. And so that's just a different dynamic all in itself. Like, that adds a whole different layer of relationship. And so I think, for me personally, I realized that it wasn't just my dad. It was like a lot of times. So when I became a preacher's kid, I'll just roll back, I was 13. And so think about that time. I was 8th grade, about to go into 9th grade. I mean, that time in itself is hard enough. And then you get told, okay, well, we're about to, open a church, and all of this pressure is on you, and you see it, it wasn't something necessarily that was told to my brother and me that we're not going to have time for you anymore, or we need to put our priority here. that wasn't anything that was explicitly told, but I think just observing some of the behaviors and realizing the pressures that were on them, I kind of learned indirectly from those behaviors to shrink myself and to make myself smaller, to make myself and the issues that I was going through as a teenager just not important, insignificant, right?
Yeah.
And so it's sometimes the things that were necessarily not said that kind of formulated my opinion and my perceptions in my relationship with my dad.
Yeah, that is so good, because it teaches you almost how you're going to show up in relationships in the future when you start doing these things at an age where relationships outside of family become like more important. So that's really interesting that is the response that you had. So when would you say then that you started to realize that you were a fatherless daughter in the way that your father was physically there but emotionally unavailable? When did you come to that realization?
Honestly, I think I was well into my adult years. I'll be very honest. Like, there were things that, I mean, because at that time, again, I was never one that was like really out there anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that I was really out in the streets or doing anything crazy. But when I did go off to college and things like that, I had a series of bad relationships. And, it was just situations that would occur where I wasn't quite sure why. Like, I didn't have any idea why I was showing up the way I was. I didn't have any idea why I was having these experiences. And it wasn't until, I think, probably mid to late 20s, where I started really just kind of dissecting how I was showing up and in these relationships, and like how I would respond even when I was afraid of someone leaving, or if I was afraid of someone not like reacting the way that I thought they would, right? Like, they would show up in an angry way, and I was just like, I'm not even this person, right? And so it took an ex of mine, like the person I was with at the time, to just kind of call and was like, why do you get so angry? Like, it would be something simple, and like, why do you get so angry? And even like some of my family members would say something like, they'd say, you have a tripometer, like I'm just kind of go off, right? And I would just kind of like, they would laugh it off as a joke, but I was just like, well, what is to this? Like, why are people saying this? Because I didn't realize that this was something that was a kind of a natural reaction of mine when I was fearful in situations, or if something didn't quite make sense to me, it made me scared, but I would react in an angry manner, or and so it just kind of made me start looking at my relationship with my father and my experiences growing up, and just why was I showing up this way? Why was it that, again, I think realizing that my dad was there, and like, most of the times where he would show up is like softball games or something like that. That was something I did as a teenager. And that's the thing where, this man would be speeding down the highway trying to get to these games. And I was just like, it kind of, again, those things that aren't said, but you kind of put in your mind like, oh, okay, so if I'm doing this'll get a reaction out of it. And you become you have this performance-based complex where I have to perform in order for someone to love me, in order for someone to show up for me, in order for them to stay. And and I think that's when I realized in the late 20s, when I was just like giving my all to this person in this relationship, and even just trying to show up so much for their dreams and what they were trying to do, that I didn't even have any idea or thought process of what I wanted to do for myself.
Yeah, like that really resonates, because I feel like so many of us just want to be loved and accepted and feel like we belong somewhere, that a lot of it is just, well, what can I do in order to feel this way? What can I do to make this person see that, like, I have worth, I have value, and to show up for me in the way that I need them to. And so, like, what I will call that, like everything you just described, is what I I tell my clients are like fear-based responses. And so they are like usually what happens when we are triggered by something, whether it's an event or like something that our partner says, and it's typically tied to our relationships with our dad. And so it's funny that you even started talking about that and was able to connect it to the fact that, you know, it had something to do with your father, because many of us like don't even see that connection until so much later. You know, we're expecting these relationships to be better and we know what we want, but we don't realize that, you know, that we're really accepting what's familiar and not what we deserve. So the partners that we're choosing are really just a reflection of, you know, the deficit that we have experienced growing up and not necessarily like what we really yearn for. So it's so interesting that you were able to kind of get all of that on your own, because it's, as soon as you understand that and you're really able to tap into that, you can see exactly where, like, you know, changes need to be made, and you can see like the types of partners you chose, and it's like everything just clicks into place.
Yeah, but to your point, Bernadette, like it's like it. Listen, it's like I came to the realization on my own, but that was certainly not without going through horrible, traumatic.
Oh,
things.
trust me, yeah.
And like to your point, right? Like thinking of the partners even that I was choosing at the time, I knew enough. So even though I wasn't fully aware of, I think, the lack of, I guess, maybe emotional connection that I felt like maybe was a deficit with my dad or anything like that. Like I don't think, again, I hadn't identified this as an issue. Like I had never considered myself in the category of this female with daddy issues, right?
Right.
I think stigma on females that have daddy issues or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I was just kind of like never one of those people like, oh no, like my dad's in the home, or, you know, like again, it's like that stigma is very much put in a box of what that looks like. And so I just did not consider it, right? But I at least had the awareness that I knew that my dad was pretty quiet, pretty soft-spoken, could be somewhat passive at times. And that was something that I didn't want, because I'm someone that is kind of assertive, or like at least in work and things like that. Like I'm pretty bold in my convictions. And so I'm like, I know if nothing else, like all the people that I was genuinely attracted to, they were very bold, very direct. And that was pretty much it. Like if that was the characteristic they had, I was sold. It didn't matter anything else. Like they could be as horrible, as verbally abusive, anything else. But if they were direct, it was like, okay, that's not, you know, that they're not going to be like my dad then. So I'm going to be able to have conversations with them. You know? And so again, I just, you know, I was able to at least know that without really still seeing like the full picture of the depth of how deep I think it really went.
Right.
So that was a really good point that you had brought up.
Yeah, definitely. So when then in your experience do you think you had like a coming to Jesus moment where you were like, you know what, like I'm tired of having these types of relationships and I need to do some introspection and see like what's really going on here? What happened where you came to that?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was definitely the relationship that I was referring to. It was a pretty lengthy relationship, but it was one that I know I was never supposed to be in the first place. And it was a situation that, you know, by the end of it all, I had been, you know, it was an infidelity. I mean, he was very manipulative. And I don't want to say this person is all bad. You know, I know I certainly had parts to play in it, but at the end of it all, like, I mean, this person, like I ended up almost like basically supporting this relationship, even financially. And it was draining. It was absolutely draining. And so by the time like I'm sitting there, like I'm paying these bills, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm trying to show up, I'm still supporting your dreams, I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing for my own career. And then to find out you're still lying, you're still cheating, you're still doing X, Y, Z. And I remember, Bernadette, one day, like, because this is after he had cheated at one point,
Mm-hmm.
and we had tried to, like, we were trying to work it out. And I remember, like, we were getting dressed, and I broke down crying, and he's just kind of like, well, I don't understand what you're crying about. Like, I thought we're doing okay. And I'm like, it was just like 2 weeks after this happened. I'm just like, listen, I'm trying to work through this. Like, you need to give me time. And after that response, it kind of, again, trained me like, okay, this is not all right. So I found myself like hiding. I would find myself like hiding in the closets or hiding in the bathroom crying, like during the middle of the day. I mean, I would be on work calls, and as soon as the work call's over, I'm like going to the restroom and can't even just, use the restroom in peace without literally breaking down in tears and feeling like, how did I get here? Because I can't even tell anyone how absolutely miserable I am. Because I felt like this was something that was even, again, I think kind of attached to being a preacher's kid. I was like, well, maybe this is an assignment, and this is that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes even that, you kind of get locked into this, what I call toxic religion.
Right.
And where you're trapped and trying to say it's a calling or that it's an assignment, and God didn't even ordain this. Like,
exactly.
He's not the author of confusion, so he was not in any of this. He wouldn't do that, right? But in my mind, that's what it was. And so I just remember just being so broken, and we finally came to a point where we had broken up, and I remember like going out one Friday. I had gotten off work, and I was at a stoplight, and like I was just kind of lost. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, what after those relationships where you just kind of like, well, what do I do with my time now?
Yeah.
It was a point where I was like, I don't even know what to eat, because I was, again, supporting this person almost financially. So it was like, wow, I have my check to do what I want with at this point. Yeah. Like, what do I even want to eat? Like, what do I like? Yeah. It was that point where I just like kind of broke down crying in the car. Like, I'm free, but I knew it was different this time of like, well, I feel free now, but how do I make sure I stay here? Yes. How do I make sure I stay in this moment of peace? Because I know this situation was not good at all. And so I definitely think it was that moment of just realizing how I had put up with so much over and over, and was like willing to accept things just for the sake of accepting it, for, not being abandoned, not, feeling like I was kind of like a failure in this relationship. And so, yeah, I think it was the moment, again, like something as silly as like not being able to figure out what I was going to eat, because I was just like, had been so used to having to find cheap meals so that it could feed both of us.
Yeah.
Like, wow, like what do I eat? So it's like a moment of like, okay, like what are you going to do, Patrice, to change this trajectory of your life for good, so that we don't go here anymore? And ever since then, I have not, and I just have better relationships. I've started, I started having more dialogue with my dad. I started having different conversations, and definitely, obviously, it starts within yourself.
Right.
But yeah, that was a game-changing moment for me.
Wow, yeah. It really sounds like it is. So after that relationship ended and you realized that you didn't want to be in that space ever again, what was the first thing that you did?
Yeah, so honestly, I got heavily into meditation. So that was something for me that, again, someone coming from a religious background, like I knew all the scriptures, I knew all the things that, oh, God is good and yada, yada, yada. But that didn't feel, I don't want to say it didn't feel enough in the moment, right? Like I definitely still relied on God heavily and things like that. But I felt like I needed something else, just something a little bit different. And so I really got heavily involved in meditation to where I could be present in the moment, to just really focus my alignment in being present on recognizing what was for me in that moment, and just taking myself out. I started treating like kind of coining a day as Treats Tuesday. So I would like go out every Tuesday, whether it was like the movies or something like that, or if it was something simple like buy myself a new lipstick. Like it was something that I stayed committed to. And it was just really about learning myself and figuring out the things that I liked so that when I showed up again, I wouldn't take, any slack, because it'd be like, well, great, this is nice and all, but I've been doing this. Like, I'm not impressed. I wasn't so easily impressed. I wasn't so easy because someone was bold or direct, right? So I just really took more time to nurture the relationships with myself and the people that I already felt were really adding value to my life. And I took, a lot of time, I would say, even in, where I isolated myself to the point of, maybe I don't know if people were concerned or not, because I didn't share with anyone really what had even happened in my relationship for a long time. A lot of people didn't know. And so it was really me just kind of doing the work internally. So I can say it was meditation was the absolute first thing I really had gotten into.
Yeah, I love that. And I even love the idea of like Treat Tuesdays. I might have to adopt that, because that sounds like like it could be the new Bay. Like, we're about to have a treat. Let's go. Love that.
Yeah. And I think, and I would say like, it really started something because my friends even began to realize, like I mentioned before, like I have this French trip coming up this year, and this is something we do every other year. But even when we go on vacations, they'd realize, like, before I went anywhere, like if they had met up earlier, like my friend would say something like, "Oh, Truth is coming in a little bit, but she's meditating first. Like she's up on the balcony meditating right now, so she's gonna join us." And look, like they knew how I was about this self-care. To the point where they started adopting, like, I really want to get more in tune with self-care, because I love how much you're like putting yourself first and how you're recognizing how important it is and things like that. And I just, over time, I just started doing more things. Like, okay, the peace is good. Like, the meditation is good. Like, what else can I do? Right. And it's like, I have this rigid ritual of self-care, of like even self-care Sundays. Like I kind of, I will do certain things where I may meet up with people or do certain things like that. But it's like, there are certain things in my self-care routine that I don't divvy from, because it's just, I have to be committed to me. Like I have to show up for me all the time as much as possible, so. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that as soon as you started to come into yourself and really show up authentically in your relationships, that they made room for you, and that like they just like started to kind of like see it and just like create the space that you needed to like fully be in yourself? Like, I love that.
Yeah. And it's so true, because it's like all this time you're sitting there hiding behind a mask and you're bringing these clowns, but it's like, it was no need to do any of that.
Yeah, but even, I was going to say, sorry, not to cut you. I was going to say, like, even what you said before about like, you adopted the idea of just like making yourself small as a result of, your parents starting the church and realizing that their responsibilities had grown. And so like, just when you decided at the end of that last relationship that you were no longer going to do that and you were just going to show up fully as yourself, room was made. Like your family, your friends started to recognize like, okay, like this is her routine. They respected it and even came to be curious about it, to now they want to even be better. So it's like, you see like this just effect that it has on the people around you. And it just solidifies the fact that there was no need for you to ever shrink, that when we are actually fully showing up, that, the people who are supposed to be in our lives, like actually make space for us to be fully who we are.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. When you learn who is supposed to be aligned to you, will be aligned to you. It doesn't matter what you do, what you say. Like, aligned to you, you don't have to perform, you don't have to put on, you don't have to do anything for them to show up for you, because that's the point of the perfect alignment, right? But I definitely saw a shift in just who I was even attracting, like the people that I was attracting, even if I didn't stay in relationship with them. right? It was overall just a better experience. Like I got value from them. It wasn't like my previous experiences where I just felt drained all the time. I was sad all the time, right? They were good added value relationships where it's like, I'm able to still be friends with these people. And it's just like, it's like, okay, maybe we're just not compatible, right? Whereas before it was just so toxic where it's just like, I never want to see you again, I never want to talk to you again, things like that. Right. But just showing up authentically, you see the people you attract, even in friendships or like you say, family members, things like that, they have to then respect who it is you're becoming and they begin to appreciate it. And you see them transform as a result of your authenticity. So yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely.
So what would be one thing that you would tell your younger self now that you've gone through some healing and you're a little bit on the other side? What would you say?
Oh man. I would probably say, don't be moved by the things that have been said to you or lack of things that have been said to you, because it doesn't define you. I would probably say to engage in conversation more, right? Because I think, again, realizing it's a two-way street. And even as it relates to my dad, I'm like having this expectation that he was supposed to be the initiator all the time.
Right.
And, I'd become of a certain age that I could have certainly asked questions that I need to ask or say, hey, Dad, why are we not doing this? Or why are we not having these conversations, X, Y, Z? And so realizing like some of the onus is on myself as well. And so just saying like, next time speak up and it's okay. And if they're gonna receive it, as long as you're delivering the message of love, they can receive it. And if they don't, like, it's not your fault. But you have to own your truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. So a lot of times when we are thinking about like our relationships with our parents, we learn a lot about what relationships are going to be like by the interaction that we have with them. And then also if our parents are married, like the interaction that we see that they have with each other. So when there is like a break in those relationships where we don't necessarily get what we need from our parents and specifically our fathers, the healing that has to come as a result of that usually also happens in relationships. So what would you say is maybe something that you have been working on in a relationship currently or in past relationships after you came to realize that you didn't want a relationship like the one you were describing? Would you say that you have experienced some healing in relationships as a result of that? Or are you looking to experience some type of healing in your relationships going forward?
Yeah, I would say I've definitely experienced some healing in relationships. I think realizing, again, so I don't think I'd realized before how words of affirmation were important to me. So before, like, again, based off of experiences of hearing negative things said as a younger child, or even in my relationships, I told myself, like, or like if a partner at the time was saying I love you, but their actions obviously weren't proving it, I was like, oh, words mean nothing to me, right? So I told myself that. But then realizing going in these relationships that to the point where if someone would say like, oh, you're beautiful, like, oh, you're just so amazing, it was hard for me to accept that, right? So I had to heal in those areas and just be willing, like they would say, like, Patrice, like, no, I actually mean this. I need you just to hear what I'm saying. Like, why is it that you kind of disregard what I say? And so it was certainly some healing in those areas. And I would say also in how I actually addressed conflict. Because again, I think learning how to just make yourself small or dismiss what you're feeling. A lot of times I've found that people either address conflict angrily, like in an angry manner, or they just avoid it altogether, right? And neither is probably the best strategy, right? And so I think there were times where I've certainly gotten healing where I knew I was just like uncomfortable or uncertain about something and couldn't quite express it because I was afraid of how the person would respond, or like, okay, like maybe they're gonna think I'm crazy, because again, like you're bound these thoughts of thinking like, okay, I'm thinking I'm healed, I've grown, I've done this, but it's like coming up, this trigger is coming up, and I don't like the way I feel, but I can't respond this way, right? And kind of blowing up a little bit, but then this person just being so gentle and like, it's okay. Like this was, you know, we had a rough day. Like maybe this was a miscommunication, but we're gonna do better next time, right? And that like just, it changed the game for me. I was just like, this can happen. Like this is something, you know, and it just really, again, just helped me heal through realizing even how I was responding to different things. If I had an issue of, you know, how I was going to address it, really thinking through the pattern of how these conflicts may show up and how I was going to then, one, address it within myself, and then also address it with that person directly. Right. So I definitely found some healing in that area, and just how I communicate overall and what I'm feeling, the issues and the concerns I may have in relationships.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's awesome. So speaking of communication, what is your relationship like with your dad now?
It's good. It's good. We're evolving, you know. Again, I think this is something that was years of not really feeling like I knew exactly about my dad. But I think the good thing is that he's self-aware, right? He realizes that you know, he's made comments like, you know, I know how my dad was and how he showed up. It's not excuse, but I'm really glad we're doing this now, right? He's like recognizing, like, I'm really glad we're having these conversations. I'm really glad we're spending this time. And so I would say it's evolving, right? We're definitely having better conversations and things like that. So yeah, I don't have any concerns. I think it's moving in the right direction. I think all of those things come with time and maturity, and even recognizing from his perspective, like why he may have even been responding in those ways. And again, kind of owning my own stuff of like, okay, well, Patrice, you could have also initiated some of these things too. So I think it's just created this dialogue, this avenue for us to have these healthy conversations. And it's been helpful for him not to be offensive, right? And just kind of go on the defense and really be receptive and own what it is that I've been saying. And he's had honest conversations with me to even ask, like, you know, do you think I've had, you know, I was a direct reflection of some of the relationships you've been in, and we've had those conversations, right? So I do think it's certainly evolving, and it's getting in a really, really good place.
I love that. I'm so happy to hear that, honestly. Like, you know, with this work that I do, I feel that it is so important to try to cultivate a relationship with your father if you can. You know, like, they are just so absolutely important in a daughter's life that, you know, whenever possible, if you can salvage something, or if something can be revived, or even evolve into, you know, like a new space where it's now a reciprocal relationship, that really is the goal, honestly. So I love that, you know, your relationship with your dad is one where it's evolving into a new place where, you know, you can have the types of conversations that really bring you guys closer to understanding where you both were coming from, and like you can see like where your father might have been in this space, and really kind of get to understand him as a man, like not just your father. And so like now when you see him as just like a person, it's a lot easier for you to kind of extend grace in the areas where like they just didn't show up for you in the way you needed them to. So I love that.
Absolutely.
So how has your lived experiences influenced what you do now in terms of maybe your line of work or relationships, or in any way that you want to share?
That's a good question. You know, honestly, I don't think I'd actually realized the connection until probably a couple of years ago. So I work in, you know, human resources, essentially, like that's my 9-to-5 job. And I specifically do employee relations, right? So part of my work is to listen to employees' concerns, like as it relates to equal employment opportunities. So like discrimination and harassment. So really having the difficult conversations, right? So it's funny how I was able to do this in my work sector, but then not able at times to do it in my personal life. But I think over time, like I say, realizing that I was so keen on making sure people felt seen and heard. And I realized how difficult it could be. I realized how difficult it could be to be courageous to even speak up and say, like, well, this is how I'm feeling. And I don't know if this is really how I'm perceiving it, because the line of work that I do, like when people raise those types of concerns, for example, if someone's raising like a racial discrimination or even gender discrimination, like I think someone is treating me differently because of my gender. It just feels like they talk to Sally, but not to me, right? Those experiences can be very gray, my line of work, right? So it's a lot of times based off of perception. And it takes courage to kind of even say, like, I don't know if this is what's really going on, but this is how I'm feeling. And really just making that person feel validated in their concerns and saying, like, listen, we're going to look into this. We are going to absolutely find out the best possible solution, and really recognizing that I had become, like, I'm so passionate about being an advocate for people in those spaces, and really everyone, right, in that process, because I want to make sure that it's so fair and equitable. And so I realized like how that shows up for me, and even in relation to my relationships or experiences, because I am literally, it's just reincarnated over and over again, someone that wanted to make sure that this little girl was seen and heard and understood in her experience of being maybe this preacher's kid that had to kind of silence herself or be invisible at times, or when I wanted to be invisible, probably wasn't able to be, things like that. And you just see it show up that, you know, again, I wanted to just kind of be this advocate for this person, because I wanted someone to advocate for me.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely see how it shows up in my day-to-day work. And even now as an entrepreneur, you know, as a peace creator coach, that's something that is so vitally important to me, because I know what it's like not to have peace. Like, you know, and I think sometimes people really undervalue it because it's not attached maybe to finances or like prosperity or things like that. Like if I say today, like, oh, I just got $20,000, like I'm gonna get all the hoorahs in the world, right? Say something about like, oh, I'm at peace, you know, you'll get a few likes and it's like, oh, that's great, Patrice, you know, but people don't realize like what's attached to that, and people don't realize how the $50,000 may be attached to the peace and the processes and things like that, right? And so for me, it's so critically important to teach that in my line of work, because I know how different life situations can really alter how you view things. And if you don't get a hold of it quick enough, it leads people down this path of depression or anxiety, into this really dark space that some people don't come out of. And that I don't want for folks. And I do believe that peace can be attainable for everyone. And particularly, like I say, I really like to focus on those high achieving women, because I find that those are the people that are working so hard because they are coming from that performance-based complex a lot of times. And they are maybe killing it at work, but everything else around is falling to pieces. And so I really want to make sure, again, and I feel like that's another kind of direct reflection of some of my relationships and how I've connected it to the work that I do.
That is amazing. That is amazing. And I can tell that just based on what you're saying, like, it is so needed. It is so needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't actually need it until you recognize, like, and that's the thing. So it's interesting because, like, you know, as I've been like just even building out my work and working with different clients, like a lot of times people don't realize they need it because they don't realize it's something that they're lacking necessarily.
Yeah.
Right. It's something that they don't, I think, realize until maybe like something really big hits them, or how it even shows up in everyday life of conflict, right? where if you're even conflicted about how you view yourself, right? Because there's certainly different ways in how it shows up when you don't have a lack of peace, whether it relates to yourself internally or these external factors regarding your relationships or environmental things that are outside of your control. And I think that's the thing. A lot of people undervalue it because they don't recognize maybe even the signs of like, maybe I don't have peace, right?
Right.
And so it's like, but when you get it, it's a significant difference where you're like, how did I ever live my life without it?
Exactly.
So
it's wow, yeah. Like peace is a thing that honestly, like once you even get a glimpse of what it is, like you don't even want to go back to anything that you were doing before.
Listen, you value it so much. It's something I hold in such high regard. You move so differently, and you are so selective of the people you allow in your space. You become so protective of your time, of the things that you hold dear to you, because at that point it is a treasure. It's right. And it's like, I cannot allow anyone or anything or any situation to infiltrate this peace kingdom that I've now built.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the real deal. Like you say, it cannot be broken once you obtain it, for real.
I completely agree with you there. So at the end of each of my interviews, I like to do something called Bernadette's Quick Five. So it's a 5-minute session where we just do a rapid fire question. So I have 5 questions for you, and then you can just tell me what the first thing that pops into your head is. No wrong answers. You ready?
All righty.
All right. So what's one thing you think people get wrong about fatherless daughters?
That they are problematic.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
What is one thing that you believe that you're better at because you're a fatherless daughter?
I would probably say just asserting myself now. Yeah.
Yeah. What is one book that you've read that really improved your relationships with others?
Ooh, Boundaries. I don't know. I think his name is John Townsend. I'm forgetting the name now, but it was a book on boundaries. Game changer. Like, it just really had me realize, again, one of those things where it's like you don't realize you don't have it until you read it and recognize like, oh wow, I really was horrible in boundaries in a lot of areas here. So
that's a good one. Okay. What would you like to be known or remembered for?
I want to be known for helping people. Aside from helping people obtain peace, I really want to be known for this person that helped inspire people achieve their highest potential, because I think there's so much inside of people. I think that it's the everyday people that can inspire folks the most. And I think that we have the ability to do so much greatness within our lives if we can just tap into that potential. So I want to be that motivator that really disrupts like people's current behaviors and thought patterns. So.
I love that. So this last one is a fill in the blank. So it is, my name is blank and my father loss does not define me because.
My name is Patrice and my father loss. My father loss does not define me because I'm still amazing. I am still the peace creator, and I'm still gonna walk in my purpose.
Yes, period. Love it. Love it. Patrice, I love talking to you today. It was really a pleasure. It really was.
Hey, Bernadette, thank you so much. You're so beautiful and so graceful. Thank you so much for even opening this space. I know your community is benefiting from this so much. It's a well-needed topic and discussion. So thank you again for your service.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Where can people find you?
I am mostly on Instagram nowadays at The Peace Creator. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I have a podcast that will be coming out on April 6th called the Oasis Space. So you can, join me there in that community where I will, give some additional insight and have some guest interviews where we discuss various topics on becoming a peace pursuit. In that community, we have a Facebook community as well. So we'll discuss those episodes and links and just other various issues and concerns of life. It's just a more intimate community where it's like-minded individuals that'll be there for support and hold us accountable. So either of those spaces, you can find me, and love to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for letting us know that.
Yes.
It was very nice talking to you.
Yes, same, Bernadette. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was the interview with Patrice. It was such an informative conversation. I really loved her spirit and just the introspection that she's really been able to have about how she has responded to the new role that her father took on, and ultimately what that looked like as she grew and she had relationships with others. So this conversation was really interesting, and I love it because it doesn't show you exactly the kind of father loss experiences that we're used to hearing about. Her father is there, and although he was emotionally unavailable during some portions of her life, you realize that the way that we look at fatherlessness is so vast. Like, it really is a spectrum in that, what my experience is may not be what your experience is, but we may still believe that we both are fatherless daughters. So again, I just wanted to thank Patrice for coming on. It was such a great conversation, and you can connect with her on IG at The Peace Curator. It is The Peace Curator, on IG. And just to let you guys know again that she will be coming out with her first podcast episode, and her podcast is called The Oasis Space. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from her again in her podcast and to continue in conversations here or inside of the community, H.E.R Coalition. So again, ladies, if you are interested in a space where you can share your stories, where you can connect with other women who really have the same experiences as you and who support and are in community with you, join H.E.R Coalition. So you can join again at BernadetteJackson.com/community. And if you have any questions that you would like for us to answer on the podcast, or if there is a topic that I haven't yet discussed that you'd like to hear about, you can reach me at BernadetteJackson.com/help. I will see you in the next episode. And remember, you deserve amazing relationships.